And we're back, and as you can see by my display there, it's a little out of frame, a few things. As you can tell, it's still hot in the summer of the Joker, and if what I think is what I think it is, we have a unique specimen for today. I'm just going to, um, dang it. But I need the, to be able to hold this, and it looks like, oh, it felt a little thin. I thought it would be thicker than this. Again, I'm fairly certain this is what yeah, it is. And it is. We have Dark Knight Returns, The Last Crusade by Frank Miller, Brian Azzarello, and John Romita Jr. I'm sorry, I don't know anything about the last game. But yeah, I said this felt a little thin because there actually was a hardcover re-release of this book. But yeah, so if you don't know, The Dark Knight Returns was a Batman comic published across 48-page issues, published in 1986 by Frank Miller. And while the Adam West image of Batman had been, even back then, had been a thing of the past, like, no one actually reading would associate the books with the image of Adam West and Burt Ward. But in the public eye, basically, anyone who wasn't a regular comic reader, pretty much, if you asked them about Batman, they'd say, "Oh yeah, hand me down the shark repellent bat spray," or "to the Batmobile," and all that kind of stuff. So The Dark Knight Returns was essentially Frank Miller telling what he felt was the final Batman story, or at the very least, it was the end of the Dark Knight, set in the distant future, possibly as if, say, the character had aged from when he first appeared at the time from 1939 to 1986. He was like 55 years old in the story. Gotham was rampant with crime, even though a lot of his old nemesis, like the Joker, had pretty much gone comatose. Harvey Dent had actually had facial reconstructive surgery done, and a lot of other of his rogues gallery had more or less retired. They started coming back one by one, and crime was out of control in the entirety of the city. So basically, Bruce just stepped back into the role, and that basically brought his old nemesis, the Joker, out. So, the Dark Knight Returns is, and I'm probably going to bring this up in another video that isn't going to be related to the Song of the Joker, because he wasn't in it, but, this was published a year after Crisis on Infinite Earths. So, what that was basically, the DC Universe was given a reboot in 1985. The continuity of the Golden Age was pretty much thrown out so that it could start over, and we had reboots of Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman from 85 to 87. And it was probably the success of Dark Knight Returns that actually got Miller the gig writing Batman Year One, which was the first, initially the first post-crisis story that retold Batman's origin. So I'm just going to take this out of the poly bag here so we can take a good look at it. And now, as for what this is, this story, wolves, sheep, what's the difference? Oh, it's kind of a little dingy up there, but it's still in relatively good condition. This story was published in, let me see. Let me check that. Actually, there might be an invoice in there. So, based on The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller, hasn't been opened very much. Yep, there's Joker. That's actually the second Robin Jason Todd, so what this is in addition to a sequel to Dark Knight Returns, okay, that was published in 2016, there it is, DC Comics. So in 2016, right before Frank Miller wrote another sequel to Dark Knight Returns, this was published to basically be the prequel to everything that happened in the first Dark Knight Returns. And it actually tells what happened in a very important plot point that was published in Dark Knight Returns. In that, the current Robin at the time, Jason Todd, had been killed by someone. We don't know who, it just says that he died in the line of duty. And at the time, the main DC Universe Robin Jason Todd was actually still alive. He was finally killed off in 89 or so, 88. in the death in the family, not of the family, in the family storyline, which I've mentioned before. And a lot of people say that his death in Dark Knight Returns was somewhat influenced him dying in the main DC comics. And this story is basically, it tells what happened. And ironically, in some respects, it's often called Frank Miller's remake of Death in the Family. And another thing that it's got an interesting connection to is it's essentially a Batman and Robin story written by Frank Miller, and he actually wrote a mini-series that a few years ago, All-Star Batman and Robin. Again, that's another book I could probably take a look at. And a lot of people hated that series. Like, they just hated it. It was just so badly written. It completely... in short, it was basically... it was written as a book of... a Batman book that could be picked up without having to worry about continuity. A similar concept would reappear with the Earth One Grass series another few years later. Again, I might take a look at on its own. But written by an all-star writer like Frank Miller, who had a lot of hit titles, including Batman titles under his belt, and art by Jim Lee, who was a well-known comic artist at the time. But it just got plagued by delays and setbacks and bad reception that it's not even finished. Like, it was supposed to last 12 issues. They only made it up to the 10th, and it was never completed. So you could arguably call this both what All-Star Batman and Robin should have been, as well as unofficially the 11th or final issue of that series, because, well, it's a Batman and Robin story written by Frank Miller. So I can't open this too much, at least not like this, because... and I know I'm going backwards, but this is just to get it... So the art was done by John... There's Joker. It is a Summer of the Joker role. And if you don't know, John Romita Jr. is known for having like this very blocky, sort of bulky style when it comes to drawing people. It might have been influenced by Miller's style when he wrote the original Dark Knight Returns artwork. Because it definitely resembles it a lot. Like, I swear this was drawn by Miller himself, if, it wasn't... if it wasn't flat out said to me that. And okay, this panel structure here. Let me see this 4 by 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. This 3 by 6. This 3 by 9 panel style it wasn't in Dark Knight Returns that had actually Dark Knight Returns actually had a lot more, like a 16 or so grid panel. But this layout was actually popular in another of the time, Watchmen. And yeah. The panel layout was actually very popular in that story, published roughly around the same time as Dark Knight Returns. So yeah. That's it for this look at Summer of the Joker. It's not really a Joker story, to be honest, to be frank. But he does appear in it, and it basically does tell what happened to him just before he pretty much went comatose for God knows how many years between the events of Dark Knight Returns and this book. So, like I've said, I've got a couple more videos lined up. They might actually not be Joker related soon, but I'm still going to keep the title going as long as I have material to work with. Thank you, and good night.